Hello guys, welcome to the FilmBox. My name is Isa. I am a photographer in the Atlanta area. Now, I specialize in portraits and been using the A7R II for the longest time. I've been a big Sony fan and that's been my main photo camera. But now there's a different brand that has really got me into looking at photography a little bit different. I've been shooting more street photos now, more than just portraits alone, and I owe it to one camera, and that has to be the X100v. Now, we're gonna be touching some points about this camera that is been widely talked about, such as, is it all hype? Is it worth paying over retail for it? And I'll touch on all those points to see if it's something that maybe is a good fit for you, or maybe you might have to get an alternative, which I have some suggestions for that as well. So let's get started. Let's get started with the cons and pros of this camera. So pros about this camera. This little camera has a lot of great features on it and it has a lot going on for it. Let's start with probably one of the most popular things about this is the aesthetics of the camera. Now this camera, I often get asked a lot, is it film? Is it a film camera? And no, it's not, but from the front it looks straight up like a rangefinder like back in the days. Now, a lot of cool things about this camera is just the fact that it makes it so easy to be able to shoot with it. Everything that you need during a photo shoot, it's right there in the reach of your fingertips. Now, such as ISO is right there on one of the dial. As you can see, the little window, just like the old film cameras. On top of this dial, then you have your shutter speeds there, and then your compensations right here. And one of the most popular things I think that people love about this camera, it would be the optical viewfinder. You're able to use it as if it's like a rangefinder. So you have an actual optical viewfinder that has all these data. Another thing people love about this is just the small size of this camera. It makes it so easy and portable to use, to have around your neck. It's not a heavy camera. It's not light either, but you feel like it's very well built. Next thing, which makes it the most popular reason people are getting this camera, is the film simulations. You have many film simulations, and what is that? It's a simulation that mimics film, and that's what has made this camera very popular. And another thing that you can do with this is called film recipes, which you can customize those film simulations to make it even more customizable to the way you want your photos to look. You can save up to 7 of them in the menu right here, and you can just flip back and forth between one another to see what's the best simulation for that scene. So let me share some photos with you guys and just let me know what you guys think. I had the privilege to get this camera whenever I went to my trip to Colorado. That's where my wife is from. So her dad took me to these beautiful places to take photos. There's a lot of rundown areas, a lot of classic cars and things like that, and where they live. So I was able to take those photos there, and it's probably some of my favorite work I've taken with Fujifilm. And I took all of my Fujifilm cameras actually, but this is the one I used the most, just for the fact that I had gotten it brand new. Not brand new, but it was new to me, so I wanted to try it out. So now let's talk about the cons of this camera. To be honest, there's not many of them because this camera is almost perfect. And what makes it not perfect is what we wanted to talk about earlier, is the hype behind it. because of the hype, the price has gone crazy high. Right now they're averaging around $2,000 for this camera, which I find that to be a lot. They retail for $1,400, so the fact that you're paying $600 more for this camera is kind of insane. Is it worth buying it for $2,000? I personally don't think so. There's a lot more options you can get for $2,000 when it comes to a camera, such as the XT5. The camera body alone on this thing is really nice. There's a lot of features. It actually has more features than the X100v, but you're saving yourself almost $300 buying this one right here. The only cons to that is that you do have to buy the lens separate, but I mean, you can get a Fujifilm lens at maybe $200, $250, like the 50mm 1.8 or f2, I believe. But the fact that they cost about the same is kind of insane in my opinion, because that's another thing we want to talk about, and it's the con for this. This might not be a con for everybody, it's just depending on your photo style and the way you shoot and everything, is that this is a 23mm lens, but it's a fixed lens, so that means you can't swap it out for a different lens. You will always stick to this one. Now this is a 23mm focal length, which is the same as a 35mm in full frame. I personally love that a lot. I shoot with a Sigma 35mm 1.4 on my Sony, so the fact that this has this lens is perfect for me. If I could have one lens and one lens only, it would be this focal length. I wish it was 1.4, but f2 is perfectly fine for what this is meant for. You won't get the craziest shallow depth of field, but I feel like with this camera you're really not aiming for that. You want everything to be sharp, so for the most part I'm always shooting at f8 or f5.6 or f11, just depending how harsh light or how much I need things to be in focus. Now I do want to give you an alternative to this camera that it's a little bit easier to get. They're about the same size and it has about the same features, and you might find some cons and pros about each of them, but I find a lot of good pros about this next camera. So let me show you one of the best alternatives to the X100v, and that would be the Fujifilm XE4. Now this little camera has some pros and cons. It's like the little brother of the X100v, but let me go over some of the great features this camera has to offer. One of them would be the interchangeable lenses. That's probably the biggest one. You can actually change the lens on this camera, unlike the X100v. So if you already have Fujifilm glass, you can put any X mount lenses to this camera. Another great feature that this camera has is how small it is. It's actually very pocketable, and you're not sacrificing size between the X100v and the XE4. Another great thing that I would love to say about it is that it shares the same sensor as well. So these two cameras take the same photos when it comes to image quality. So you're not sacrificing image quality, and the only differences is really three little things right here. So the X100v offers an optical viewfinder, which you cannot have on the XE4. But if you're the kind of photographer that's always looking through the electronic viewfinder, you won't have no issues. This offers it, and it has a great electronic viewfinder. Another thing would be a built-in flash. This camera doesn't have a built-in flash. You can get the one that goes on the hot shoe, but if you're somebody that doesn't use the built-in flash as much, then you won't have an issue with that. And another thing would be the ND filter. X100v does have the ND filter, but this one doesn't. I personally never used it because I don't shoot wide open when it's broad daylight, so I just stop down the lens if I need to at the case. But if you needed to have an ND filter, then you will have to screw one in front of it here on the lens mount. So that's up to you. It just depends what's your shooting style. So very similar cameras, except for one's very difficult to get and you have to overpay for it, while this one, it still might not be the easiest ones to get, but I've noticed that I can find them more on the used market compared to the X100v at reasonable price. So you can usually get one for about $1,200 with a lens, or just the body alone. Most people tend to sell it for just $800. So I hope this video helps you make the best decision for your budget, your camera needs, and your shooting style. And if you have any questions, just leave in the comments below. And also, don't forget to subscribe for more photography and gear content.